She was 32 years old and she was about to lose everything. Her name was Sophie Mitchell, and she had just been told that her voice didn't matter. Her name was Sophie Mitchell, and she had just been abandoned by the only people she thought would always be there. Her name was Sophie Mitchell, and she was about to undergo surgery that would determine whether she could ever have biological children again, and she was going to have to do it alone. But before we tell you Sophie's story, I need to tell you why you clicked on this video. I need to tell you what brought you here, because your pain is the reason you're watching this right now. You clicked on this because you know what it feels like to be unheard. You clicked on this because someone you loved, someone you trusted with your whole heart, made decisions about your life without consulting you. You clicked on this because you've spent years feeling like your opinion didn't matter. You clicked on this because you're tired of being invisible in your own relationships. You clicked on this because you know what it feels like to be a mother who is drowning. You know what it feels like to love your children so much that you would do anything for them, but to also feel like you're doing it all alone. You know what it feels like to ask for help and to be told that it's not anyone else's responsibility. You clicked on this because you've been in a situation where the people who were supposed to have your back suddenly disappeared. You clicked on this because you've learned that family doesn't always mean what you thought it meant. You clicked on this because you're looking for hope that things can get better, that you don't have to do this alone forever, that there is a way through the darkness. This story is for you. This story is about what happens when you reach absolute rock bottom and you discover that you are stronger than you ever thought possible. This story is about what happens when you stop waiting for rescue and you become your own hero. Let's begin. Sophie had spent the last 9 years in a marriage where she was slowly erased. Her husband, David, was a good man in many ways. He was a successful attorney. He was handsome. He provided financial security. But he had made it very clear through words and actions that Sophie's opinions didn't matter. When Sophie wanted to move for a job opportunity that excited her, David said no. They didn't move. When Sophie wanted to have the children that she desperately wanted, David said maybe later. They waited 6 years before David finally agreed to start a family. When Sophie suggested that they go to therapy because she was feeling disconnected, David said therapy was for people with real problems. Sophie had learned to make herself smaller. She had learned to keep quiet. She had learned that if she just accepted what David wanted, life would be easier. She had learned that her voice, her thoughts, her dreams, her desires, simply didn't matter. The turning point came when Sophie discovered that David had been emotionally involved with a coworker. Not physically, but emotionally. He was texting her at midnight. He was having long conversations with her about his feelings. He was sharing intimacies with her that he never shared with Sophie. When Sophie confronted him, David didn't apologize. David didn't feel guilty. David told Sophie that she was being unreasonable. He told her that she was being controlling. He told her that she should have understood that emotional connections with other people were normal and healthy. Sophie realized in that moment that David had no idea who she actually was. David had no interest in understanding her perspective. David had spent 9 years with her and had learned nothing about what made her happy, what made her sad, what made her feel valued. Sophie asked for a divorce. The divorce was messy in ways that only divorces with children can be messy. Sophie and David fought over custody. Sophie wanted 50-50 custody. David fought for 60/40ths in his favor, arguing that Sophie was too emotional to be a primary caregiver. The judge ultimately granted them 50-50 custody, with Sophie getting the children Monday through Wednesday and David getting them Wednesday through Sunday. Sophie moved into a small apartment. She got a job as a graphic designer, making decent money but not nearly enough to cover all the expenses that came with having 2 children half the time. She took on freelance projects on the nights when she didn't have the children. She was exhausted all the time, but she was finally free. And then she got the call from her doctor. Sophie had been experiencing pain in her lower abdomen for months. She had attributed it to stress from the divorce. But when she finally went to the doctor, they discovered that she had a large fibroid tumor. The doctor explained that the fibroid was pressing on her ovaries and that it needed to be removed surgically. The doctor also explained that if Sophie wanted to have more biological children, and Sophie had always wanted a larger family, she needed to have the surgery done soon, before the tumor could cause permanent damage to her fertility. Sophie scheduled the surgery for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks to prepare emotionally and logistically for a major surgery. 6 weeks to figure out who was going to take care of her children while she was recovering. 6 weeks to figure out how she was going to manage the recovery process while also being a single mother. She called her parents. Sophie's parents had been her rock throughout the divorce. They had provided emotional support. They had watched the children when Sophie was working. They had been the stable presence that Sophie desperately needed. "I have to have surgery," Sophie told her mother. "I have a fibroid tumor and it needs to be removed. I'm scheduling it for 6 weeks from now." "Oh honey, I'm so sorry," her mother said. "That must be scary." "It is," Sophie said. "And I'm trying to figure out logistics. I'll have the children for the first 3 days after the surgery, but I won't be able to pick them up or take care of them properly. I was wondering if you and Dad could watch them for those first few days after I get out of the hospital. Just until I'm more mobile." There was a pause on the phone. "Sophie," her mother said slowly, "we've been helping with the children a lot since the divorce. Your father and I are getting older. We can't keep doing this." Sophie's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean that taking care of your children is your responsibility, not ours," her mother said. "We love them, but we're not young anymore. We need to start thinking about retirement. We need to start thinking about our own lives." "Mom, I'm about to have surgery," Sophie said, her voice shaking. "I just need you to watch them for 3 days." "I understand that, but the answer is no," her mother said. "You need to figure out how to manage this on your own. You're their mother. It's your job to take care of them." Sophie hung up the phone and she sat in her apartment and she cried. She cried because she was terrified. She cried because the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally had just told her that they had limits on that love. She cried because she suddenly understood that she was completely alone. She called her father. Her father said the same thing. He said that they had already done too much. He said that it was time for Sophie to learn to be independent. He said that he wasn't willing to take on the responsibility of caring for 2 children while his daughter recovered from surgery. Sophie hung up the phone and she felt something die inside her. Sophie had 2 options. She could ask David's parents to watch the children. Or she could figure out another way. She called David's parents. They were kind people and they loved their grandchildren. But they also knew about David's behavior in the marriage. They also knew that David was not supporting Sophie emotionally through the divorce. And they said that they would have watched the children if David asked, but that they weren't comfortable getting involved in their son's marital problems. So Sophie had no one. She looked into hiring a nanny to stay with her for the first week after surgery. A full-time nanny cost $200 a day. For a week, that was $1,400. Sophie didn't have $1,400 extra. She was barely making ends meet as it was. She looked into asking David if he could take the children for an extra week. David said no. He said that he had work commitments and that Sophie's health issues were not his problem. Sophie spiraled into depression. She became convinced that she couldn't do this. She became convinced that she would have to choose between her health and her children. She became convinced that no matter what choice she made, she would be failing someone. 3 weeks before her surgery, Sophie reached out to a support group for single mothers. She went to a meeting at a community center on a Tuesday night. There were 8 other women in the group. Each of them had their own story of abandonment. Each of them had their own story of people they thought loved them turning away when things got hard. One woman, named Maria, shared her story. Maria had been abandoned by her parents when she had a complicated pregnancy. Maria had been told by her in-laws that they couldn't get involved. Maria had managed the pregnancy alone, had a complicated delivery, and had recovered alone while taking care of 2 young children. "And you know what I learned?" Maria said to the group. "I learned that I am stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I don't need anyone's permission to be a good mother. I learned that the people who abandoned me said more about them than about me." Sophie listened to Maria's story and something shifted inside her. Sophie realized that she had been waiting for permission. She had been waiting for someone to tell her that it was okay to ask for help. She had been waiting for someone to validate her pain. But what she actually needed was to validate her own pain. What she actually needed was to ask for help from people who might actually help her. Sophie posted on a community Facebook group. She explained her situation. She asked if anyone in the community would be willing to help a single mother recover from surgery by watching 2 children for a few days. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, Sophie had 12 offers from people in her community to help. A woman named Janet, who Sophie had met at the coffee shop where she worked on her freelance projects, offered to stay at Sophie's apartment for the first week after surgery and help with the children. A man named Carlos from her children's school offered to bring meals to Sophie's apartment for 2 weeks. A group of women from her church offered to set up a meal train. People she barely knew offered to help. Strangers offered to support her. The community wrapped around her and held her up. Sophie realized in that moment that she had been looking for help in the wrong places. She had been looking for help from the people who were obligated to love her. Her parents, her in-laws, her ex-husband. But those people had made it clear that their love had limits. Instead, she found help from the people who chose to love her. She found help from strangers who became friends. She found help from her community. Sophie went into surgery on a Thursday morning. Janet was with her. Janet held her hand in the pre-op area. Janet told her that everything was going to be okay. Janet believed in her. The surgery lasted 3 hours. The doctor found that the fibroid was larger than they had anticipated, but they were able to remove it completely. The doctor also found that Sophie's remaining ovary was healthy, which meant that she would still be able to have biological children in the future. When Sophie woke up from surgery, Janet was there. Janet stayed with her for the first 3 days, sleeping in Sophie's apartment, helping her with pain management, helping her with the children, making sure that Sophie didn't have to think about anything except healing. On day 4, Maria came to stay with her. Maria had taken a week off work to help Sophie. Maria brought groceries and home-cooked meals. Maria helped with the children. Maria sat with Sophie while Sophie cried about the betrayal of her family. "They abandoned me when I was most vulnerable," Sophie said to Maria. "Yes," Maria said. "And that says everything about them and nothing about you. You are worthy of support. You deserve to have people in your life who show up for you. And now you do." Sophie recovered from surgery faster than she expected. Not because she didn't have pain, she did. Not because she didn't have complications, she did. But because she had people around her who believed in her. She had people who showed up. She had people who chose to love her. By week 3, Sophie was able to take care of her children again. She was still healing, but she was functional. And she had learned something profound. She was stronger than she thought she was. But more importantly, she had learned that strength doesn't come from doing everything alone. Strength comes from asking for help. Strength comes from accepting help. Strength comes from allowing other people to love you. After the surgery, something changed in Sophie. She stopped trying to be perfect. She stopped trying to manage everything alone. She stopped waiting for her family to show up. Instead, she started building a chosen family. Janet became her close friend. They had coffee every week. They talked about their lives. They supported each other through the ups and downs of single motherhood. Maria became her mentor and her friend. They started a support group for single mothers together. Within 6 months, they had 30 women attending the group every week. Sophie also changed how she parented. She became more present with her children because she was no longer drowning. She was no longer trying to do everything alone. She had help, and that help made it possible for her to actually enjoy her children instead of just surviving them. She also changed how she worked. She started a graphic design business specifically for nonprofits and small businesses owned by women. She wanted to use her skills to help other people who were struggling like she had struggled. She wanted to create work that had meaning. Within 2 years, Sophie's business was thriving. She was making more money than she had ever made, and she was doing it on her own terms. She was no longer dependent on anyone. She had built her own life. But the most significant change was internal. Sophie stopped believing that her voice didn't matter. Sophie stopped making herself small. Sophie started speaking up. She started being honest about her needs. She started expecting people to treat her with respect, and when they didn't, she left. Her relationship with her parents remained complicated. They came to Sophie's daughter's 10th birthday party and they brought a gift. But they didn't apologize for abandoning her when she needed them most. Sophie had learned to accept that they might never understand what they had done. She had learned to forgive them without needing them to change. 3 years after her surgery, Sophie was 35 years old. She had a thriving business. She had a chosen family that loved her deeply. She had 2 children who were happy and secure. She had healed from her marriage. She had healed from her surgery. She had healed from the betrayal of her family. But what she hadn't expected was that her healing would become someone else's salvation. One day, Sophie was working at a coffee shop when a young woman approached her table. The young woman had been through a separation and was about to have surgery. She was terrified. She was alone. She was drowning. Sophie recognized herself in this woman immediately. She recognized the fear in her eyes. She recognized the way she was holding herself. Small, trying to be invisible, trying not to take up space. "Sit down," Sophie said. "I want to tell you something." And Sophie told her story. But she didn't just tell her the highlights. She told her the details that mattered. She told her about the moment when she realized that David had no idea who she actually was. She told her about the specific way her mother's voice changed when she said, "That's no longer our responsibility." She told her about the night she sat on her bathroom floor and seriously considered not going through with the surgery because she didn't know how she was going to manage recovery alone. "I thought about just living with the pain," Sophie told the young woman. "I thought about deciding that my health wasn't worth it if it meant I couldn't take care of my children. I thought about choosing my children over my own body. And do you know what I realized? I realized that if I didn't take care of my body, I wouldn't be able to take care of my children anyway. I realized that putting myself last wasn't noble. It was self-destructive." The young woman started crying. "I can't do this," the young woman said. "I don't have anyone. My parents won't help. My ex won't help. I'm completely alone." "No, you're not," Sophie said. And she told her about the Facebook post. She told her about the 12 people who responded. She told her about Janet, who had been a near stranger but who had become a sister. She told her about the meal train. She told her about the community that appeared out of nowhere. "But here's the thing," Sophie said. "Those people didn't appear out of nowhere. I asked. I swallowed my pride and I asked. I let people know that I needed help. And when I did that, I gave people the opportunity to be generous. I gave people the opportunity to show love. Most people want to help. They just don't know how unless you tell them." Sophie reached across the table and took the young woman's hand. "You're not as alone as you think you are," Sophie said. "There are people who will help you. You just have to ask. And when someone says no, you ask someone else. You keep asking until you find people who are willing to show up for you. You keep asking until you find your community." The young woman looked at Sophie like she was seeing hope for the first time in months. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way," the young woman said. "I thought I was the only one who had been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me the most." "You're not," Sophie said. "There are so many of us. We just don't talk about it because we're taught that we should be able to handle everything alone. We're taught that asking for help is weakness. We're taught that if we can't manage everything by ourselves, there's something wrong with us. But that's a lie. Humans are built for connection. We need each other. And asking for help isn't weakness. It's the most courageous thing you can do." Sophie opened her phone and pulled up the information for the support group that she and Maria had started 3 years ago. The group had grown from 8 women to over 100. They met every Thursday night at the community center. They talked about separation, about custody, about single parenting, about the specific loneliness of being a woman trying to do it all alone. "Come to a meeting," Sophie said. "Come Thursday night. There will be women there who have been through what you're going through. There will be women who understand exactly what it feels like to be betrayed by your family. There will be women who have also felt completely alone. And there will be women who have figured out how to build a life that is better than the one they had before. The young woman came to the meeting that Thursday night. She walked into the community center terrified. But when she saw the group of women of all ages, all backgrounds, all circumstances, something shifted inside her. She realized that she wasn't broken. She realized that she wasn't the only one. She realized that she had found her people. Within weeks, the young woman had a support system. She had people who would help her recover from surgery. She had people who believed in her. She had people who chose to love her. And Sophie realized something profound. She realized that her pain, the pain of separation, the pain of surgery, the pain of abandonment, had become her purpose. She realized that the worst thing that had happened to her was also the thing that made her capable of helping other people. She realized that her suffering had meaning because it had connected her to the people she was meant to serve. Over the next 3 years, Sophie and Maria expanded the support group. They opened a physical space, a safe place for single mothers to come and talk and share resources. They started a childcare co-op where single mothers could trade childcare so that everyone could have time to themselves. They created a job board specifically for employers who were willing to hire single mothers and work with their schedules. They started a legal aid clinic where women could get free consultations with family law attorneys. What started as 8 women sitting in a community center telling their stories had grown into an organization that was helping hundreds of women rebuild their lives. Women who had been abandoned by their families found new families. Women who had been told that their voices didn't matter found platforms to speak. Women who had thought they would have to do it all alone discovered that they didn't have to. Sophie's business also continued to grow. But she made a decision that changed the trajectory of her life. She decided to work only with nonprofits and organizations that served women and children in crisis. She decided to donate 20% of her profits to the support organization that she and Maria had built. She decided that her success would be measured not just by how much money she made, but by how many lives she changed. One day, Sophie received a message from a woman who had attended the support group 3 years earlier. The woman wrote, "I want you to know that when I walked into that group, I was broken. I thought my life was over. I thought I was a failure as a mother. I thought I would never love again, never trust again, never be happy again. But you and Maria showed me that my life wasn't over. It was just beginning. You showed me that asking for help wasn't weakness. You showed me that I could build a life that was better than anything I had imagined. I'm now remarried to a man who respects me. I'm no longer afraid of being abandoned. I'm no longer trying to do everything alone. And I'm giving back to other women the way you gave back to me. Thank you for saving my life." Sophie read this message and she cried. She cried because she understood in that moment the full impact of what she had done. She understood that by asking for help for herself, by letting her community love her, by building something from her pain, she had created a ripple effect. She had shown women that it was possible. She had shown women that they didn't have to suffer alone. Sophie started a podcast. The podcast was called Asking for Help, and each episode featured a different woman's story of abandonment, survival, and community. The podcast became wildly popular. Women from all over the world listened to the stories and recognized themselves. Women from all over the world reached out to Sophie and asked for help finding support groups in their own communities. Sophie started an online version of the support group so that women who didn't live near a physical location could still connect with others. Within 6 months, the online group had over 5,000 members. Women were supporting each other across continents. Women were finding strength in knowing that they weren't alone. Sophie also became an advocate for policy change. She started speaking publicly about the ways that the legal system failed single mothers. She talked about child support enforcement. She talked about custody laws that were biased against mothers. She talked about healthcare policies that didn't account for the reality of single-parent households. She became a voice for women who had been silenced for too long. Her children noticed the change in her. They noticed that their mother was no longer drowning. They noticed that their mother was not just surviving. She was thriving. They noticed that their mother was using her pain to help other people. And they learned from watching her that pain doesn't have to destroy you. Pain can transform you. Sophie's relationship with her parents remained complicated. They came to her daughter's high school graduation. They brought a gift. They said they were proud of her. But they never apologized for abandoning her when she needed them most. Sophie had learned to accept that some people don't have the capacity to see what they've done wrong. She had learned to forgive them while also maintaining boundaries with them. She saw them a few times a year. She was polite. But she didn't tell them about her work. She didn't tell them about the impact she was having. She didn't tell them about the hundreds of women whose lives she had changed. Some part of her wanted them to understand what they had missed by not showing up for her. But she had learned that wanting other people to change was a waste of her energy. Instead, Sophie focused on the people who had shown up. Janet had become her best friend. They still had coffee every week. They had watched each other's children grow up. They had celebrated each other's successes and supported each other through each other's failures. Janet was the sister that Sophie had never had biologically but had chosen to have emotionally. Maria had become her business partner. Together they had built an organization that was changing lives. Together they had shown women that it was possible to take the worst thing that had ever happened to you and transform it into something beautiful. Sophie's children had grown up in an environment where asking for help was normal. They had watched their mother ask for help. They had watched their mother give help. They had learned that community is not a luxury. It's a necessity. They had learned that vulnerability is strength. They had learned that the strongest people in the world are often the ones who are brave enough to say, "I need help." 5 years after her surgery, Sophie was asked to give a keynote speech at a conference for women in crisis. She stood on stage in front of 500 women and she told her story. She told them about the pain of separation. She told them about the terrifying surgery. She told them about the moment when she thought she was completely alone. She told them about the community that showed up for her. And she ended with this: "I want to tell you something that I wish someone had told me when I was in the darkest moment of my life. I want to tell you that you are not broken. You are not a failure. You are not a bad mother. You are a human being who is going through an impossibly hard situation. And you deserve support. You deserve compassion. You deserve to have people in your life who show up for you. I know that the people who were supposed to be there for you have let you down. I know that you feel abandoned. I know that you feel alone. But I want you to know that there are people out there who will show up for you. They might not be your family. They might be strangers. But they will show up because humans are built for connection. Humans are built to love and be loved. And when you ask for help, you give people the opportunity to express that fundamental human need to care for each other. So my challenge to you is this: ask for help. Ask your community. Ask your church. Ask your neighbors. Ask strangers on the internet if you have to. Ask and keep asking until you find people who are willing to show up for you. Because you deserve to have people in your life who love you. You deserve to have a community. You deserve to not do this alone. The room erupted in applause. Women stood up. Women cried. Women came up to Sophie after her speech and hugged her and told her that she had saved their lives. One woman told Sophie, "I was about to take my own life before I came to your support group. I thought there was no way forward. I thought I had to do this all alone. But then I found your group and I found you and I found all these women and I realized that I wasn't alone. I realized that I could ask for help. I realized that my life could get better. You saved my life." Sophie held this woman and cried with her. She understood in that moment the full weight of why she had asked for help. She understood that by being vulnerable, by letting people see her struggle, by asking for support, she had given permission to thousands of other women to do the same. So here's what I want to ask you in the comment section, and I want you to really think about this because this is important. If you're watching this right now, you probably feel abandoned. You probably feel like the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally have let you down. You probably feel like you're doing this alone. You probably feel like no one understands how hard this is. I want you to know that you're not alone. There are thousands of people watching this video right now who feel exactly the way you feel. There are thousands of people who have been told that their voice doesn't matter. There are thousands of people who have been asked to do impossible things alone. There are thousands of people who have looked at their families and realized that those families can't be counted on. But here's the thing that Sophie learned, and this is the most important thing I can tell you. You don't have to do this alone. Not because your family will suddenly change, they might not. Not because David will suddenly step up, he might not. Not because your parents will suddenly realize what they did and apologize, they might not. But because there are people out there who will help you. There are people out there who will see you and will choose to love you. Your community is waiting for you. You just have to ask. I know that asking for help is hard. I know that you've been taught that you should be able to handle everything on your own. I know that somewhere along the way you learned that asking for help is weakness. But I want you to understand something. That's a lie. Asking for help is not weakness. Asking for help is strength. Asking for help is what humans do. Asking for help is how we survive. Asking for help is how we thrive. Rate this story from 0 to 10. Tell me if it resonated with you. Tell me if you felt abandoned by people you thought loved you. Tell me if you've had to do impossible things alone. Tell me if you're in Sophie's situation right now and you don't know how you're going to manage. But most importantly, tell me this. What is one thing you need help with right now? What is one thing that you've been trying to do alone? What is one thing that you could ask for help with? Because I want to challenge you to do something that might be terrifying. I want to challenge you to post in the comments what you need. Not to me, but to let the community know. Let people know what you're going through. Let people know what you need. Because when you do that, you might be surprised by how many people want to help you. Subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Because there are so many stories like this one. Stories about people who felt abandoned and who found their way. Stories about people who thought they were alone and who discovered community. Stories about how asking for help can change your entire life. Stories about how your pain can become your purpose. And if you're in Sophie's situation right now, if you're facing surgery alone, if you're recovering alone, if you're parenting alone, if you're simply trying to survive and no one is showing up for you, I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think you are. And you don't have to be as strong as you think you have to be. You can ask for help. You can let other people love you. You can build a community of people who will show up for you. Your family might let you down, but your community won't. Your chosen family will be there. You just have to be brave enough to ask. You just have to be vulnerable enough to admit that you can't do this alone. You just have to believe that people are inherently good and that when you ask for help, people will step up. Because they will. They will show up. They will help you. They will become your family. All you have to do is ask. I'll see you next time.